Carpet ride continues. This ball club has been amazing all season long.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the program. It's episode number 32 of Swinging for the Fences, and we do have a special guest tonight, and unfortunately we couldn't get the video worked out, but we got him on audio. It's my good friend Brian Abker, the captain. The fucking captain's on board this week, man. This is awesome. How you doing, Brian?
Hey, Steve, man, I'm doing great. I appreciate it. And yeah, isn't it just a darn shame that the audience can't see this amazing face?
What are you talking about?
I think your viewers and your listeners lucked out today, man. So no, as long as I can hear you and we can chat Mariner baseball, we're good.
I don't even know what you're talking about, man. You got one of the greatest faces for TV, man. Like I've said that for a decade now, man. This is awesome.
Oh man, you're funny.
Some think so, but yeah, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And of course, if you guys are watching on Twitter, thanks for tuning in. And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Chats and comments are going to be available via the YouTube stream. And of course, I don't have to explain that. I think it's pretty much self-explainable. All right, so let's get into it. The Seattle Mariners, by the way, went 4-3 this last week, and I got to be honest with you, Cap. It was a brutal road trip. Outside of the 2 of 3 in Oakland, they were absolutely embarrassed in Kansas City. As a matter of fact, Game 1 of that series, the Mariners post 7 runs in the first inning and lost. As a matter of fact, Bryce Miller had a horrible start. I think he gave up 7 runs on 6 hits through 5, and the bullpen absolutely collapsed. And that pretty much was the catalyst for that series. Yes, the Mariners came back and won Game 3 of that series, but overall, the bullpen was absolutely atrocious in that series. And of course, there was a little bit of carryover into the Chicago series. Opening up against Eric Fedde in Game 1, they were absolutely dominated through basically 7 and 3rd innings before all of a sudden they flipped the switch. And the Mariners ended up winning that. Cal Raleigh hits the walk-off grand slam. I got to be honest with you. This is the weirdest first-place team I think I've ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, that's one way to put it. There's no question. Okay, let's go back to what you were saying about the road trip and talk about the Kansas City. Sure. Here's what we know. We know Kansas City's probably the best team in baseball at home. Kansas City, in and of itself, that team is very, very tough. And if you were going to tell me to list 4 teams that I thought that could be in the World Series from the American League, Kansas City would probably be second on that list of my top 4.
Yeah.
They are very good. So I don't consider that the Mariners got embarrassed. I consider the Mariners just aren't there yet from that series. Now, that loss, that comeback win by Kansas City hurt Mariner fans deeply. It reminded us of that game in Cleveland. However many years ago that was brutal. And the Mariners,
2001, I think.
Yeah, 2001. But that turned out to be a great year for the Mariners, right? I mean, just regular season-wise, anyway.
Of course.
But the Mariners haven't been spectacular on their first game back from a road trip. Travel's tough. It's always the toughest on the West Coast teams and usually the toughest on the Mariners. Not that that's an excuse. It's just it takes them a game to shake the cobwebs out a lot of the times once they get home. And they did get dominated in that first game against the White Sox and then pulled it out of their poop chutes, right? They found a way to get it done. And I couldn't agree more with you that this is the strangest first place team that I've seen, at least here in Seattle.
Oh, it's without a doubt. I mean, for a team that's basically utilized solid pitching and defense, to combine that with one of the league's worst offenses. This was trending somewhere of what we've seen over the course of the last 2 seasons, where by mid-June, this team is 5 games out of first, kind of hanging there in the wild card before they can figure out a way to turn it on in the second half. But yet here we are, thanks to injuries to Houston, with the Astros and the Rangers. All of a sudden, the Mariners have a lead in this division, and now they're sitting in the catbird seat. But it's the weirdest thing. I mean, if this team had a mediocre offense, just a slightly mediocre offense, they probably would have a 10-game lead in the division.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I forget who I was having the conversation with. It's like, okay, even if you had a crappy team like the White Sox, even if you the Angels, let's take the Angels.
Okay,
even if you had the Angels offense, which is like, okay, you wouldn't notice them. They don't stand out. But even if you had the Angels offense, you would be on a tear right now.
For sure. Yeah. It's amazing though. It's amazing that when you work around some of these issues, on top of the fact that the Mariners right now statistically bottom of the leagues in run, bottom of the league in OBP slugging, WRC plus, you can go across the board. Yet they have pockets where they're very good in one-run games. Like that's like if for a team that's got a shaky bullpen, yet for whatever reason they lead the league in one-run games. They have the ability to find pockets where all of a sudden for a half an inning, boom, all of a sudden they erupt for 6 runs and they're able to pull a rabbit out of their hats. I can't remember, like you and I go back for a long ways with this ball club. I can't remember, even in the heyday, even when they were good, I never really saw this.
No.
And it's weird.
No, even when Jack Zarenzik solely focused on pitching, I don't remember this type of anemic offense on a team that was showing success in the win-loss column. I mean, it's a bizarre combo, and people talk about sustainability in baseball. And I'm one of those that believes that this type of baseball is not sustainable. You have got to add some pieces to that offense, and they've got to be the type that actually hit, in the 290s, in the 300s. You can't keep doing it with these 167 and 212 hitters. It just won't work.
It's weird because they seem to take the approach of what they do with the bullpen, where they try to find reclamation projects for their bullpen. Isolate a certain pitch, and then all of a sudden you get a Paul Sewald. You get a Drew Steckenrider from a couple years ago, where you're able to utilize their strengths, and it becomes an asset. And I like to think that that's what they're trying to do. They try to do it with Frazier. They try to do it with Winker. They try to do it with Polanco, Garver. They try to do it this year with Mitch Haniger. And that's what happens. Like, it's like a different animal when it comes to offense. And it for whatever reason, not only have they not been able to strike out, but it almost seems like they're afraid. It almost seems like they're afraid to take a risk on the open market and bring in a guy who they can pair with Julio in the lineup that is going to be able to carry an offense when the rest of the team is struggling to get through a month, right? It's the weird. I don't understand it. Maybe it has something to do with Robbie Cano and handing out a 10-year, $242 million deal and have it come back to bite you in the ass. Maybe it has something to do with that, or maybe it's a philosophical issue where they feel like they would rather just draft, develop, call certain guys up, and then hand out contract extensions. It's the weirdest. Say what you will, but when you look at teams across the league that continuously have success, yes, drafting and developing is a very big part of the equation, but it's only 50% of the equation. The other half of the equation is being aggressive in trade, and then also taking risks on the open market. Sometimes you just have to, throw some money down and bring in a dude, that's going to get the job done.
Oh, no question. Well, let's back up to what you were talking about with Robbie Cano, and I put it as the Cano Cruz combination, right? You brought in Robbie Cano, Nelson Cruz, and those moves at the time, as a Mariner fan, I was like, finally, okay. But here's the problem: the timing was terrible. That team was not ready for those guys yet. You did not have your foundation of your youth set. Now, they not only have their foundation set, they're starting to bring up the second wave of that youthful foundation. You have built up from a trash heap to one of the best minor league systems as far as rankings of players in the top 100 in the minor league systems across baseball. So now's the time to use that. People seem to forget that your minor league system is all about assets. That's your stock portfolio right there. That's what you deal from, right? So you say, okay, I'm going to keep this for myself. I'm going to sell this back out to the market and go get that Lamborghini that I want. That's how the minor league system works.
Thank you. And that was, by the way, that was a smooth transition to our main to our main. By the way, you're the segue king, man. That was perfect, because that was, because as we get into our main topic tonight, and you hit it right on the head, your minor league organization, yes, it is to streamline certain positions. Obviously, pitching is something that the Mariners are very, very, very good at drafting and developing. But that being said, because the Mariners are in a very fortunate position to have the bulk of their core already at the major league level, and there's only a finite window for them to win a championship, because over the course of the next 3 years, you have guys that are going to become expensive through arbitration. You also have to make some hard decisions if you're not going to be able to re-sign them. And so right now is the time where you actually have top prospects like Laz Montez, Cole Young, Harry Ford, Phelan Celestine, Johnny Formello, Colt Emerson, Ty Pete, guys who are going to be coveted by other major league teams. And you're in a position where, again, not only are you in a position to win your first division title in 23 years, but you're also in what I would consider kind of a down year for the American League. Yes, Baltimore's good, but for the most part, you're going to be in a position where in a 5-game series or a 7-game playoff series, if the moves are correct, you're going to be in a position to hoist your first pennant in team history. And the absolute notion that you wouldn't trade a guy like, Laz Montez, or name that prospect, for a dude like Bo Bichette, or a guy like Luis Robert Jr., or even taking a wild swing and getting a dude like Pete Alonso, even if it is a rental. You hit it right on the head. Your minor league organization, yes, in some terms it is to develop and call up for certain positions. But if you have 16 rounds in a clip, why the fuck wouldn't you start shooting?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the rental situation, because, by the way, Pete Alonso, of all the names that I've heard, might be the best fit for what this team needs when it comes down to it. But I was just talking to a buddy yesterday, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if I want this guy and this guy, because it'd be kind of a 1-year rental. Well, first of all, we don't know that for sure, because we don't know that the Mariners don't have the ability to sign somebody on the free agent market once they've been here and played, with some of these players and have grown close to them. B, who cares? If this pitching staff is as good as everybody says it is and thinks it is and has seen it is, it's an historically good pitching staff. How often does that come around for a franchise? So what you said, when the time is right fucking now, it is right fucking now, period. So go do what you have to do and go get who you have to get. Unload the farm system. I don't care. You've proven you can rebuild it, and you're going to end up selling off pieces another season or two down the road probably to rebuild that farm system. So go get the guys you need right now.
Absolutely. And I think fans forget this main point. This isn't a Mariners organization that was under Bill Bavasi or Jack Sorensic that did not know how to build a minor league system that streamlined players to the big leagues. This is not where we're at. We're not even under Pat Gillick, who was, by the way, was not brought in to rebuild the farm system. He was there to win a championship. So Gillick neglected it, right? What Jerry DiPoto and Justin Hollander have been able to do is something that I don't think we've really ever seen in the history of this franchise. So the notion that they're selling the farm is absolutely ridiculous, because if you draft and develop incredibly well, the odds that they're going to be able to replenish the farm system within 2 years is a high probability, a very high probability. So if you trade off a guy like Thielen Celestine, who I really like, or a Cold Emerson, the odds that they're going to be able to draft and develop or trade to replenish with those top end prospects, it's going to be like a 90% chance that that's going to happen within the next 2 years. So you're really not missing anything. Period.
Yeah. For whatever reason, there's a group of fans that fall in love with these minor league players. Maybe it's because they live where the minor league team is, and they see them play, and they become part of their day-to-day routine. I don't know. But let's face it, there's another dude around the corner for 98, 99% of all these dudes. There's a very, very small percentage of these guys that are going to develop into these all-stars, the Hall of Famers that you hope you can get in your minor league system. So the rest of them are just either good ball players or never live up to the billing or the hype, or can't make it in the majors for whatever reason. So I've never looked at any minor league player as untouchable when you're in position to win the division at the major league level.
100%. And the thing that bugs me is fans that say, well, Laz Montez is going to be Yordan Alvarez. Maybe, but then again, he also could be Jared Kelenic. How many top prospects over the course of the last 6 years? Okay, let me back this up. How many top prospects have we seen come through this town in the last 15 years that ended up not panning out? The likelihood of success to failure when it comes to process is incredibly low. You actually get more misses than you do get hits. That's why what's happening right now with this core has been unbelievable, because we've actually seen a great deal of success. But the idea that you don't want to trade somebody because he could potentially be somebody 4 years down the road is absolutely asinine. And it goes back to this, right? You and I have been in this town, been around this baseball team since the 1980s. Okay, like we go back forever. And the reality is this team historically is not a good team. 5 playoff appearances. We just we got lucky because the heyday we saw the top end of what this team could be. And not a lot of fans remember that, but we were in a position at one point in time where Woody Woodward actually did that. He actually swung for the fences at the trading deadline. I remember 95 very well. When he goes out and gets Vince Coleman, he goes out and gets Norm Charlton for the back end of the bullpen. He goes out and gets Andy Bendis and fills gaps, and he traded prospects in order to get that done. He did it again in 97. There was a time, and this is very recently, Brian, that there was a time where the idea of prospects was a non-starter. It was, yes, if you had a number 1 draft pick, or if you had a bonus baby like Junior or A-Rod, obviously those dudes are going to be in Seattle sooner rather than later. But if you had a guy who was making his way through the organization, and all of a sudden you needed a third baseman because you're in first place at the deadline, it's not how quick can we get him up to the big leagues, or he's going to be XXX and X or whatever. It's what's the trade market for that prospect? It was like that. That's what prospects always were until about 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And there was like this weird flip when DiPoto got hired. And then all of a sudden it's now prospect mania. It's the weirdest. It was the weirdest transition.
No, and I agree. And I think things were a little bit different back in the 80s and 90s with prospects, because, okay, let's take a look at what the Mariners had in Ken Griffey Jr., right? He was kind of the very first of the sons of major league stars, right? So now you've got the Bichettes, the Guerreros, several guys, right? But Junior was a one of one at that time, and they were going to bring him up as soon as they could. Alex Rodriguez was such a superstar prospect, they were going to bring him up as soon as they could. So nowadays, it's very rare that teams are trying to bring these guys. They have to be undeniable for them to be brought up to the big league club. So the movement of players from the minor league system to the bigs is a lot slower now. So that's why I think prospects are much more easily movable in trades for a proven commodity, a guy that's done it at the big league level to bring to your winning team. So it's just a different scenario than back when the Mariners were kind of trying to build their franchise and hitting that winning path in the mid-90s.
Yeah, for sure. By the way, this is coming from our chat room. This is coming from Rooftop Sports. The Mariners are still recovering from the Heathcliff Slocum trade. That's great. That's great.
That's pretty awesome, and I bet you could add about, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 other moves and situations to that Heathcliff Slocum. But, oh, yeah, that was just – that will forever burn in my soul as the worst.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, the worst was Omar Vizquel for Felix Fermin. To me, that was the worst.
Okay. I could put you there. Yeah, because I think –
and then also the Adam Jones trade was pretty terrible, too.
Adams Jones trade was pretty bad because he was a guy that was going to be the next long-term Mariner star, right? He was going to be the guy that started and almost ended with the franchise. Might have done a Ken Griffey Jr. and gone somewhere for a little bit and then come back or whatever. But that sucked. Yeah,
and yeah, that's the point. Sometimes trades, sometimes you don't hit on trades, but just because that's. And like I hate to say it, that's baseball, Brian. For as many successes as you're going to have in the trade market, you're also going to have trades that just don't pan out. It happens. But that being said, the idea that you're not going to trade somebody for fear of what he could develop into at the expense of your major league roster, which by the way is not performing at all. I mean, it in clips, yes, they're in first place, but it's the idea that it just seems to me, it just seems completely asinine.
I agree. Now let me ask you this question because I'm really curious on your stance and your feeling about this. When you make a trade and you bring a guy in, how important is the chemistry and the personality of that player on top of his physical abilities and his proven stats? How important is chemistry when bringing in a player like that at this point in time in the season?
It depends on the player, right? Like for example, a guy like Jesse Winker, who came in with kind of a shady reputation as a teammate, and the Mariners kind of ignored it a little bit because he was coming off a pretty solid year and a couple solid years in Cincinnati, and so they thought that was going to translate. And as long as he was producing, I think they were willing to live with it. But of course he didn't, and he was gone after 1 year. I think it all depends on. I think it really, for me at least, I'm like, is he the type of dude that is a clubhouse cancer where it's going to cause a division in the clubhouse to the point where that bleeds on the field? Then probably not. You know what I mean? And of course, players talk. Players talk. Reputations are around the sport. You know what I mean?
Okay. So let me give you an example. If
go ahead.
The guy that the Mariners are going to trade for, whoever that is, whether it's a Guerrero or Lewis Jr., whoever, if you heard that guy had the same type of personality as Kelnick did, do you want to make that trade?
100%.
Okay.
Because I don't think Kelnick was I don't think Kelnick was a clubhouse cancer. I think he was a highly emotional dude, and I think accountability is a foreign term to him, because I don't think that dude understands what that word means. But that being said, from everything that I've heard, that he was actually a very good teammate. So yeah, for a dude like to have a phenom who is absolutely, crushing the baseball, to him have a personality like 100%.
Okay, now my take is, I've heard completely differently about
I've heard both.
him
I've heard
as
both.
a teammate. And if you'll notice, when he was traded, not a single player came out and said, "Damn, why did we do that?" We've heard players do that on multiple occasions with less than great ball players that the Mariners have traded away recently. So, and either way you shake it out, the Mariners need better talent at the plate. So that's probably priority number one. But I think there's a little bit to be said about who you bring in and how they affect the mood and the clubhouse vibe, because they do have that team, despite their lack of hitting, those guys will die for each other. They've got each other's backs big time in that clubhouse.
For sure. I heard both. I heard both rumors of Kelenic. But that being said, the only thing you need to know about Jared Kelenic is, as he was leaving Seattle, he was taking pot shots at the organization on his way out of town, and that just lets you know the type of dude Jared Kelenic is. But let's see. In the chat room again, Rooftop Sports, 2,000 Mariners were scared to trade Gil Mesh, Joel Pinheiro, or Ryan Anderson for Juan Gonzalez. The Tigers offered. I don't think it had anything to do with the prospects. I think it had everything to do with taking on payroll.
It did. Yeah. So that was that was Gillick's.
Yep.
Was that his? So they bring in this guy, this wizard, this championship guru, and then they don't give him the bag that he needs to go get the players he wants. That was another silly situation, but again, that came all the way down. That's an ownership thing.
Right. They cut Gillick off at the knees. I actually heard it from a former player that who was actually friendly with management, who was saying that that 2001 team, that Pat Gillick actually had saved money from the offseason because he knew that he was going to need some sort of, he was going to have to create himself some financial payroll flexibility in order to add at the deadline. And of course, the Mariners had one of the greatest seasons in Major League history in 2001. And then when it came to the deadline, ownership said, you can't spend the money.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the likes too. And
yeah, it's amazing.
If we ever get down to the real nitty gritty of the story, I would love to read that in one of these books that are put out by one of the Seattle beat writers that do a book, because I think that would be a real interesting story.
I also believe it was the reason why Ken Griffey Jr. ultimately wanted out of Seattle. I think he saw after 95, after coming off of 95, and he saw the Mariners trade his buddy Tino Martinez and Jeff Nelson to the Yankees. Coming off a very good postseason, instead of running it back or even adding to it, the Mariners subtracted and got a little worse moving forward. I think that rubbed them the wrong way.
Okay, and that's a fair assessment. But what if I told you, and this is nothing that I can talk about on air, but
I also think it had a lot to. I think it also had
the reason Ken Griffey Jr. left had absolutely nothing to do with baseball.
I would happen to agree with you. I think also A-Rod played a very big role into that as well too.
No, I'm talking about a scenario in Ken Griffey Jr.'s personal life that very, 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 very few people even know about, is the reason that he ended up going to Cincinnati. Was going to go to Atlanta, ended up going to Cincinnati, and it was out of his control if he wanted his personal life to remain the way he wanted it to remain.
I would believe you. Because I would believe you 100%. That's what I would say.
It's something you and I can chat about off air, because there's a real interesting story there.
Sure, absolutely. But it brings us into a very good topic. I do want to know who you would like to see come to Seattle at the deadline. But I'm curious to know how you feel about this current ownership group, because as you know, John Stanton last week came out and said that resources will be available when it comes to the deadline. Now, he didn't say what those resources were. He didn't say if they were prospects. He didn't say if it was added payroll. He did say that Root Sports wasn't the reason why the Mariners didn't raise payroll this offseason, which is a complete and utter lie. Because that's all we heard in the offseason, that they're cutting, Dipoto got his knees cut out from under him because of the uncertainty of Root Sports. I'm curious how you feel about this, because I got to be honest with you, I don't trust John Stanton at all. I don't, because we've heard the promises and then we've seen the results.
John Stanton. So for a guy who made all his money in communications, he is a terrible communicator, right? I mean, there's some irony there, because he never wants to tell the straightaway truth, right? He's always dancing around it. Mariner fans, I think, have become very tired of John Stanton and his political. Maybe it's not political. It's just he never can come out and say, "Hey, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to spend a dime." He's always trying to lead you on. Or when he says, "We've got resources," I mean, that could mean anything. That doesn't tell us a single thing. So who do I want the Mariners to add? I don't know. I bet you could probably hit maybe, almost 200. Why don't we sign you? I feel like that could be an upgrade. I mean,
I don't see that happening.
As we talked about at the top of the show, it depends. Okay, what are you giving up? Here's what I want. I want the absolute best proven superstar that the Mariners can get that's available. So if let's say the Yankees were struggling, I would say I want them to pilfer whatever they're willing to ship out, but they're not. The Yankees are not struggling. So is that a Guerrero? Is that a Lewis Jr.? Is that the DH from the A's? I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he was an all-star last year.
Oh, you're talking about Brett Rooker?
Yeah. I mean, I just want them to go get the best possible player available that's going to boost and energize the offense. That's it. What about you?
I have a problem with Luis Robert Jr., and my biggest problem is he's the type of trade that potentially gets GMs and coaches fired, because yes, he's got the extension, so he's signed for another 3 more seasons, but he's also only played over 100 games in one season of his 5-year career, and that was last year, where I think he had like 120 games, somewhere around there. He has been injured every single season of his career. And dude, I like Luis Robert Jr. I don't give a shit that he's going to have to move to the corner outfield. I just don't care. Defensively, he's going to be fine wherever corner you stick him in. My biggest problem is I don't care about club control if you're only getting 60 games from him for a season. It makes
totally agree.
To pay the package prospects that is going to need to get them. It may or may not, that's the risk that you take, right? And I mean, if he's healthy for if you got 3 more years left from him and he's healthy for 2 of them, I would probably take the high end on Luis Robert. But I think for me, if he's available, if he's really truly available, you have to go get Bo Bichette. 150% of the time, all the time, you go and get a dude like Bo Bichette. I realize that he didn't get off to the greatest start this year, but the dude just hits everywhere. He's one of those high-level players that it doesn't matter what stadium you put him in, he's going to hit. He hits for some power, but he's gap-to-gap power, double, singles, walks. You know what I mean? The dude just continuously gets on base, and it's a situation where depending on the Polanco situation, there is a possibility that Polanco could be moved to third and you can put Bichette at second base. He's got a year left on his deal too, so you don't get him for just this year, you get him for next year, and he's the perfect dude that you slide in second in the lineup, hitting right in front of Julio Rodriguez.
Right. So if the Mariners can't get like a Juan Soto or a Bobby Witt Jr. or Ronald Acuna or a Freddie Freeman, right? Because none of those dudes are on the market, but those are the kind of guys that I would want to be going for and spending my entire portfolio in the minors if I had to get something like that. Then looking at what's available, I would agree with you. I would think Bo Bichette's probably near the top of that list. I agree with you about Lewis Jr. You see, here's my thing about Lewis Jr. Like, he is just coming off the IL and he's been struggling. He hasn't played 100 games other than one season. Yep. So does that mean that maybe the asking price isn't what is floating around out there? Is it going to be a little bit less because the White Sox go, well, damn, man, we need prospects. We got to rebuild this entire organization, and Lewis Jr. is not quite as attractive because of those things as he was had he not gone on the IL already this year.
Right. Let me ask you this question. If you were in charge of the Chicago White Sox, wouldn't you try to leverage Luis Robert Jr. for as much as you possibly could get? Wouldn't you try to get more than one team involved and try to get into a bidding war to get the max that you can get for a guy like that?
Of course, I'd probably do that no matter who I was the GM of. But I'd also say I might not be the GM here very much longer if I don't get something going. So I'm going to take maybe the best, earliest offer and start my plan to rebuild, because the draft is coming up soon, and I want to have some pieces, and I want to know what I want to go after, and that's an interesting question and a tough call. But if I'm the GM of the White Sox, yes, I want the most that I can get, but I also want to pull the trigger on something so I'm not standing there holding the bag.
Oh, without a doubt. And I also think that whoever's going to be the GM of the Chicago White Sox is only going to have that job for so long anyways. That is probably one of the worst jobs in sports right now. That is a terrible team right now. But if you told me that at the end of it, that we would end up with, let's say, Chaz Chisholm from Miami, as an outfielder, and then you ended up with Bo Bichette, and then you got a bullpen piece like a high leverage arm like Michael Kopech from the White Sox, or Tanner Scott of the Marlins. If you told me that's what the Mariners came away with, or even if you couldn't get Chaz and you ended up with a dude like Mark Canha from the Tigers, who can play multiple outfield positions, can play first base, can DH, something like that, who's just a consistent hitter. Yeah, he's old. He's getting up there, but he's still one of the more consistent hitters in the league right now. If you told me that was what I would end up with at the end of the deadline, those three players, a dude like Chaz or Bo Bichette and one of those relievers, I would be through the roof.
Listen, and we keep talking. We were talking earlier, just really talking about one player, but the Mariners have to add at least, and this is my opinion, 2 bats. They've got to get 2 bats, or a bat and some more speed on the base paths. Now, I've been a huge fan of Jazz since he entered the bigs. I love that dude. I love his style. I love everything about him. But let's face it, he's not a consistent hitter for average, which is something that the Mariners truly need to insert into their lineup. But I'll take everything else about him and bring him on board along with a Bo Bichette or whoever else it might be that can add some actual pomp and circumstance and solidarity to this lineup right now.
Oh yeah. By the way, they could have had Juan Soto this offseason. He was available, and it would have taken quite a bit in order to do it. Hindsight's 2020, but knowing that Brian Wu was having health issues, and by the way, he was scratched again. He was scratched last night, and his health is always going to be a question mark. But at the beginning, in this offseason, if you were telling me that it would have taken 4 of our top prospects and maybe Brian Wu in order to get a dude like Juan Soto, I do that 100% of the time, all the time. he was available, and the Mariners were afraid. And now he's a Yankee, and he's probably going to stay a Yankee for the rest of his career. But the crazy thing is, there's a lot of good talent out there, and it's going to take a lot of creativity. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this, Brian. But the reality is, a dude like Dom Canzone playing every day is just not going to work out. Even Ty France, who I'll give him credit over the course of the last 30 games, he's picked it up a little bit. But you're talking about a first base position that, quite frankly, is a power position in the infield. You're going to need a guy that who can at least tread water average wise, but is going to give you the 40 doubles a year. That's going to give you the 25 to 30 home runs a year. One of those type of players. And Ty France is not going to cut it. We have it. Like, I don't know how you feel about the third base position, but Josh Rojas, yeah, he's had a good start to the season, but I'll be honest, he's not an everyday player. It didn't work out with Jorge Polanco. There's multiple positions, both corner outfield positions, both infield positions, bullpen issues. Like you're absolutely right. It's going to take 2 bats, if not 3, to remedy the situation.
Yeah, and you're going to get me fired up on this whole thing, but I was not a fan of not re-upping Teoscar. I wanted Teoscar on this roster. I was not a fan of getting rid of one of the best third basemen that the Mariners have had since Adrian Beltre. I don't care about their strikeout ratio. I feel like those are things that are gonna even themselves out over time. And here's the other thing. The Mariners go out and they create a position called offensive coordinator. Get the fuck out of here. What? And then they fire the guy, right? I mean, they're in my opinion, the Mariners have just made a bungle after bungle when it comes to the off-season situation. But right now, they have an opportunity to erase all their screw-ups and get this right and go get a couple players and keep this train moving in the first place direction and make an actual legitimate World Series run.
I would agree with you. I was okay with them not bringing back, getting rid of Geno Suarez. He was coming off a down year, and they made a calculated decision that it was only going to get worse. And sure enough, the proof is in the pudding. In Arizona, he's now available for trade because he's gotten off to a terrible start down in Arizona. Here's the thing. My biggest issue with Teoscar was the fact that he was brought in to carry the load offensively in the power department along with Julio Rodriguez. Now, Julio ended up having a very good second half last year and worked his way into the MVP, and I think he's going to do the exact same thing this year. But it was the inconsistency of Teoscar Hernandez that for me was frustrating, right? I like Teoscar. I loved him in Toronto. I like him this year in LA, and I don't know what it was last year, if it was a systematic issue where when it rains, when it pours, and the entire lineup was struggling. And of course, maybe there was some carryover effect. I have no idea, but he's too good of a hitter to perform that way. And the question you had to ask yourself with Teoscar Hernandez was, number one, was coming off the year that he had, was the qualifying offer of $20 million, was that juice worth the squeeze? That was the only question that I had. And I don't like, that's the thing. Hindsight's 20/20, but I don't know, man. I thought they got it right. Not at $20 million a season. At the same rate of $15-16 million a season. I know it's only $4 million, but that being said, at that price point, I probably would be all for it.
Yeah, and I think that's the way a lot of people felt. I felt like I was willing to shell out a few extra clams and hit that 20 mark, because I thought last year his struggles were due to the transition, right? There's a big transition when you're coming from East Coast to West Coast, when you're coming from Canada to the United States, when you haven't been with a team during spring training. I think that there's all those things. Now you see he's with the Dodgers. Yeah, he's got protection up the yin yang and doesn't even need it, right? But he was also became part of the team during spring training. There was a better acclimation period. And I think if he would have gone through that here in Seattle, I think that we would have reaped the rewards and seen the benefits. But again, that's speculation, and that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and you wonder whether or not he even wanted to be in Seattle. I know that he smiled for the cameras and said the things that he was supposed to say, but you're absolutely right. You're coming from an organization in Toronto that was basically his first home. He had great lineup protection. Of course, he's hitting in one of the best hitters ballparks at Skydome, and then you go from that to a Seattle Mariners franchise that had basically a leaky lineup, and now you're playing 81 games at T-Mobile Park. You know what I mean? Like there are going to be certain things that are going to be at play for the reason why you're struggling. But that being said, I think you're absolutely right about that, though. I mean, coming in, if staying into that situation for another year, coming in early to camp with the guys, getting the camaraderie, having all that for the second go round, it probably plays out a little different.
Yeah, I mean, we sometimes forget. These guys are humans, right? And they make human connections with each other. And it's just like when you go to a new job, right? If you don't feel at place at your new job, like when you moved out to the Mitten, right? You had to kind of build a whole empire for yourself again, and friends and coworkers, and you either land in a fortunate spot or you don't. And I think he did. I just don't think he had time to make that adjustment.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very good analogy because it took me about a year and a half. It took me about a year and a half, 2 years to really get settled in. Yeah, that's a very good point. As we're winding down this show, one of the things that I said last week on the show was that if you're just going off of splits, it's obvious that the Mariners are a second half team. They're dating back all the way to 2021. They caught fire. June was was what I like to call the swing month because it seemed like June always propelled themselves into a very good second half situation. And of course, Julio, Cal Raleigh, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo. It seems like this team really starts flipping the switch when it comes to July. And so I like that for all the offensive struggles that this team has in the first half. I was like, it doesn't frustrate me because I know what's to come. But that being said, we still really haven't seen this team catch fire like I think you and I both expect to see in the second half. But if I ask you right now, is there a guy in this lineup that you trust wholeheartedly?
A guy that I trust. When you say trust, what type of trust are we talking?
Just somebody that that's going to come to the park and consistently put in the work and consistently put up numbers. Just a guy that you just look at and say, that dude, I know, yes, okay, he might be struggling, but I know that dude's a professional. I know that dude's going to hit. Yeah.
Well, okay. First, we're going to start with Julio, right? So Julio's still learning how to be a professional, but I 100% trust that he is always going to put in the effort and do what it takes to make himself better. Now, I'm disappointed in a couple things with Julio in his learning curve, especially in pitch recognition, and maybe his approach at the plate. I would like to see him, first of all, his balance just makes me want to throw up, right? One of the things you learn from an early age is how important balance is when you're at the plate. And he seems to be able to have success without that, but he's going to need to get his balance in order. And number two, when he doesn't swing at that low and away garbage as much, he doesn't chase as much, but he still hasn't gotten as good at it as he should be. But I'm going to put Julio on the list. JP, let me tell you about JP. He might not have the best numbers and average, but that dude at the plate will make a pitcher work, and he will absolutely show up, work yeoman's work every day at the ballpark, batting practice, watching tape and film, sitting down with the other players. So JP, and then of course Big Dumper. Big Dumper struggled a little bit at the plate, but the guy's as clutch as we've seen in a long time. By the way, another conversation for another day, as there's a lot of baseball aficionados that don't believe in the term clutch. Love to have that conversation with you another time. But I definitely trust Big Dumper. So those three you could put on my list. How about you?
Yeah, and by the way, I 100% believe in clutch, and I also believe in momentum as well too, because I played sports, and I can tell you that good things seem to happen when momentum is on your side.
Yeah.
It seems that it propels you to heights that you didn't necessarily think that you had in you. I definitely believe in momentum 100%. Here's the thing, right? And I agree with you with Julio. My biggest issue was I thought they did him a disservice by giving him that contract in the first year of his career, because I think it put unnecessary pressure on his shoulders to not only carry the team but also carry the entire franchise. And the kid was like 19, 20 years old, and I just think that's far too much responsibility for a kid that young to be put in a situation where all of a sudden, you had a lot of fanfare, but now all of a sudden you're the face of the franchise and we're going to give you $500 million over the course of the next 15 years. Good luck, kid. Have at it, right? And I also think that they give him too much information. I know that sounds kind of funny, but when you think of the Seattle Mariners, one of the things that they pride themselves on is their advanced analytics department, and there's a shitload of information that they give these guys. And I think when they come to the plate, they're thinking about certain things when they probably should be focusing on whether or not that was a ball or that was a strike. But that being said, all that said, he still finds a way in the second half to work himself into the MVP race. You know what I mean? Where it's like all the struggles that he has in the first half seem to magically disappear in the second half, and he does eventually carry the team. It's the consistency that's going to make him great, is putting it together for a full season, which is something that he just, for whatever reason, can't seem to put together right now. My other guy is JP Crawford. You're right. I mean, as far as power peripherals and slugging peripherals, yeah, he's not that guy. But what he is the guy who's going to get on base. And for a team that struggles with running runners in scoring position, he always seems to find himself in scoring position. I think what I think you said was absolutely perfect. He's the type of guy that's going to make somebody work. And if you make a mistake, he can spray the ball into any field. Like some of the best at bats is when he takes exactly what a pitcher is willing to give him, which is like if they're trying to go away with some type of changeup, he'll just dump it into left field. I love that about JP. He just comes up and puts together professional at bats. The maturation process from when we got him from Philadelphia to now has been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. This Mariner team has a lot of the perfect pieces that you would want on your bench for a championship run, right? They've got the Demos, the Canzones. Those guys are guys you want on your team, but you need some bigger horses up front leading the way.
Sure. My only issue with Cal Raleigh is he's feast or famine. It's either he crushes the ball or he struggles, putting balls in play, or he strikes out a lot. And to me, the same things that apply with Julio Rodriguez to me apply with Cal Raleigh as well too. It's putting yourself in a position to be more consistent at the plate, and that's one of the it's the same thing. We're talking about a guy who's only in his third year of pro baseball. You know what I mean? Third year at the major league level, right? So it's like he's also on a learning curve as well too, and they put a tremendous amount of responsibility on his shoulders as well. And that's the thing. The everything seems to me, everything that you can talk about Julio applies to Cal Raleigh as well too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I don't trust him.
No. And the thing is, though, in all fairness, I'm in the bag for Cal Raleigh, because one of my biggest gripes about this franchise for decades has been they haven't had a catcher worth a shit. So you had Dave Valley and Dan the Man, and those are and maybe a Kenji Jojima. But other than that, their catchers have absolutely sucked. And so to get a guy like Cal Raleigh that's nails at calling a game, great with the pitchers, can throw dudes out, has a hose, is a leader, a big dude, will get dirty, and then has some bang and pop and can be clutch. I'm going to let the rest work itself out, and I'm just going to be happy with that.
Yeah, and that's also a problem with me right now, is the fact that because the pitchers do not want to pitch to Zevi Zavala, it's now Cal Raleigh's in a situation where he's playing 15 games in a row. And that's also, for me, that's also a detriment to Zebi Zavala, but it's also a detriment to Cal Raleigh.
Yeah, that guy's a bum in my opinion. And you know
Oh, for sure. And I don't understand. Like, if you're not going to play him, he has no business being on the roster. But that being said, the reason why you signed Mitch Garver was because you wanted him to be strictly a DH, because you didn't want to risk injury to him. And now all of a sudden you're using him as a backup catcher, and now you instead of having a 4-man bench, you have a 3-man bench because you're just it's like, just in case there's an injury, we got Zebi. And it's like, well, if you're not going to play him, what the fuck is he doing on the roster?
I mean, you might as well bring up Ford at this point and have him be that dude, right?
Yeah, I mean, when he's ready, I mean, certainly, it would probably make sense. It would probably make sense if you're only going to give 1 day a week to a backup catcher, you might as well have a backup catcher that's actually going to, see the field. But
I mean, I know that Ford needs his at bats, and it would be kind of foolish. But I'm just saying, on the other side of the tracks is like, hey, it would be the same thing. It wouldn't matter.
By the way, this is coming again from the chat room. This is Rooftop Sports again, who says Howard Lincoln. He said what? John Stanton makes me miss Howard Lincoln.
Isn't that something, man? Isn't that something?
I never thought I'd see the day that anybody says that anyone makes me miss Howard Lincoln, because that dude was a shifty operator. But I'll say this as we close. The thing about this team is, I like the fact that they're in a position where they can take advantage of a weak AL West. I don't like, as much as I would love the scenario where the Mariners, the Mariners chase down a Houston or Texas, and then put a lead on them and take the division that way. I don't give a shit at this point. I really don't. I like the fact that the Mariners are where they are right now, because it gives them some breathing room, right? It gives them the ample opportunity to really sit down, look at their areas of need, and have they're not chasing them. They have the opportunity to really find out what's out there, find out what's going to make them better. And I have no doubt that they're going to pull the trigger. I mean, Jeff Passan said they're in go mode. I believe Passan 100% of the time as well too. So I think I'm in a position where I'm actually looking forward to the deadline, because you know what? When Jerry Dipoto really takes a swing for the fences, he rarely misses.
Yeah, no, I give Dipoto a lot of credit, man, because he's working with his hands tied behind his back a lot of the time. So he's doing the best he can with what he has. And I'll say this, I don't mind that the AL West is weak. I mean, Houston's still good. They've had some injuries. And let's not discount the loss of Dusty Baker as a manager has a major impact, because Dusty Baker's one hell of a skipper, and guys love to play for him. So the Angels, obviously, without Trout and his injuries, and of course, having their mega superstar go to the other team in Los Angeles hurts. So I'll take advantage of it. Give it to me all day long. All I care about is that this team makes the playoffs and has a legit chance at making a run at the World Series.
And absolutely. And if you and for those that have been around as far as Brian and I, when the Mariners are good and the Mariners make the playoffs, you see Seattle come alive. It really is a sneaky good baseball town. And I would love to see this franchise not only get in, but make a deep run and potentially get to a World Series, because I think Seattle would absolutely bust at the seams if the Mariners not only get to a World Series, but also win one. As cool as it was when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, and I know, like you and I both know, that was a great time for the city of Seattle. I think this town would absolutely burst if the Mariners won a World Series. I think, dude, Seattle would go absolutely apeshit.
No, I absolutely agree. They would, and the difference is that the Seahawks had been to a Super Bowl prior to winning one, so we already had a little bit of experience there. We've got zero experience in baseball in that corner.
Right. Hey, by the way, right before we take off, I've been meaning to ask you, man, how do you feel about the Seahawks' new head coach?
Time will tell, man. I mean, if they had to get rid of Pete, and I guess it was time, and nothing ever stays the same. I like the move that they made. It'll be interesting to see how he develops.
Fair enough, man. I don't really know enough about him outside the fact that he was Baltimore's DC. All I know is with the NFL, if you don't have a quarterback, you're not really going to go that far. It's a different league as it was 15 years ago than it was 20 years ago. It's a different league. It's a different product. And, he could be absolutely fantastic. But again, if they don't have the quarterback, man, it's probably not going to materialize.
But more importantly, I forgot to tell you, I love that Letterkenny shirt you're wearing, man. That thing's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, dude. Absolutely, man. Go Irish. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank the captain. It's always good talking to you, man. I'm glad you were able to make it on the show today. It sucks that we couldn't get the video feed taken care of, but it is what it is. Sometimes things happen, man. But hopefully I can get you back on sooner rather than later. Thanks again, man.
Dude, anytime you want me, I'm here. I appreciate it, man. See you, buddy.
Yep. Everyone have a great afternoon, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.